Welcome back, YouTube. So today's video I'm going to discuss how to get clear water in a fish tank. So there's a few things that will cause a fish tank to not have clear water, and all of them are relatively easy to solve. The first and biggest problem I find is a bacteria problem. Now, this normally occurs at the beginning of the tank's life because, as I mentioned in many videos, beneficial bacteria needs to be present in a tank in order for it to be a healthy ecosystem. So the reason this is that bacteria, its job is to break down the nutrients of the fish waste and extra food, like the nitrates and nitrites and ammonia, and convert it into things that are less harmful. Now, the reason it clouds the water is because when you introduce fish or plants or any organic matter into a tank, the bacteria doesn't really have food before then. So it's able to survive in very small quantities and survive just off of trace amounts of food in the water column. But right when you add fish, the amount of food that they have skyrockets, and bacteria, as many of you know, reproduces very, very quickly. And when their food skyrockets, their population does too. So the cloud in the water isn't waste or anything like that. It's actually bacteria. Now, the best way to get rid of this, the problem with this is it happens to most beginner people, or actually everyone who starts the tank, but at the beginning when you don't know much about the tank itself. And a lot of people will drain all the water and fill it back up. But the reason this is bad is, in fact, it'll actually get rid of all the bacteria and reset it. So basically you're restarting the cycle, and it'll just happen again and again and again, and people get frustrated with that and eventually give up because it keeps coming back. But what you should do is continue doing small water changes, like 10-20% every few days, and from that you'll allow the bacteria to eventually settle, and the bacteria settles on rough surfaces normally. That's why a lot of people are trying to sell you filtered media and whatnot that has, they claim, miles of surface area for a lot of bacteria. I don't think that's necessary. I don't have any of that filtered media in here. I just have a few rocks. The bacteria will, like nature, eventually settle on the rocks or in the substrate, like the sand or gravel you have at the bottom, and that will clear the tank. So patience is the first one to get rid of a bacteria cloud problem. Now, another reason that a tank could be cloudy is tannins. Tannins are very natural. They are released from organic matter like trees or like branches, wood, or leaves, and it makes the color of the water yellow. And although it doesn't look good, it's actually not bad for your fish, so you don't need to worry about it. But the best way to eliminate this problem is to either continuously do water changes, and the tannins will eventually run out. But sadly, this could take a very, very long time. So what I recommend doing is boiling water and put the branch in, the wood in first, and that will get rid of the tannins or help speed up the process. And in the same time, it'll kill any harmful parasites that might be on the wood. So that's a very easy problem to fix because it doesn't harm the fish. It just is appearance that you want to fix. And then another very common way that a tank becomes cloudy is algae, or algae blooms. And a good way to get rid of this, and this will be when the water turns slightly green, or if it gets really cloudy and the tank has been established for a long time, that's generally algae. And a way to get rid of this is to prevent it from feeding. So in other words, you want to put in competitors. You could put in plants that'll get the nutrients and prevent the algae from growing, or you can turn off the lights earlier. Most people will leave their lights on the entire time they're awake, and this is just way too long because people don't go to bed when it gets dark out. And outside in nature, obviously when the sun goes down, the plants get no more light. But by reducing the amount of light, the bacteria won't be able to sustain itself and will eventually die out. So that's a few ways to solve a few problems that are surrounding water quality and how clear it is. But a big tip I would suggest is actually taking a look at activated charcoal, because activated charcoal almost does, I would say it does a polishing job. So your filter will get rid of a bunch of stuff. Your bacteria, beneficial bacteria, will clean a lot of stuff. But activated carbon will get rid of basically anything else. And the reason this is the carbon molecules bond to all the bad stuff in the water. And I'm telling you, I've never had a tank more clear than when I had activated charcoal. Now this stuff isn't cheap, but they say you have to get rid of it after a month. I find that if you rinse it out and you get like little packets, it could last far longer than that. And if it stops lasting, it's not going to harm the fish, and it'll actually host beneficial bacteria in it. So having it in a little bit longer than they suggest isn't necessarily bad. They just say that so they could sell more. But I'm going to put a link of activated charcoal, stuff that I use, in the description below. Check it out if you want. It's not necessary, but if you want a display tank that is perfectly clear, if you have water that's yellowish, I promise you it will no longer be yellow. And this tank doesn't even have it, but if it did, it would be so much more clear, even though it's already relatively clear right now, as you guys can tell. It might be a little blurry because of the camera, but the tank itself is clean. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will allow you to look at some of these fish for a second. I'm going to feed them here. They're super crazy feeders now, because they're not scared of me anymore. Let me turn on this light. Hopefully you can see better. There we go. Now, since I was distracted by the camera, I might have fed a little bit too much because it's going down. But the good thing is this, these plants, the moss, will actually outcompete a lot of algae in consuming the nutrients that are in the food, and it'll eliminate chances of getting algae. Also, on top of that, I got some autocinkless. They're very small, and they're very passive feeders. They'll nibble on stuff that goes to the bottom. But with that being said, I still overfed. They typically say you should feed about as much as a fish can consume in 2 to 3 minutes. I say that's probably too much, in all honesty. I err on feeding less than you think, rather than a little bit too much, because fish will be able to, most tropical fish will pick on algae and stuff if they really need to, but are overfed in the hobby. Sorry this video is long, guys. I'm kind of just ranting on here, but for those of you who have been part of this channel for a while, you could see how this tank has developed and changed over the course of a few weeks. I had moss in this tank, but I cleaned it off, proved that it'll survive at least for a little bit in the tank, and moved it in here. And really, that's just a sheet of moss that I just laid on top. My hope is that it'll attach itself to the rock and expand, but sadly I don't think that'll happen. I think that most of the moss will eventually die off, but even if that's the case, I'll get some ghost shrimp and they'll eat the decaying plant matter, and it'll support the ecosystem. So that being said, it's not too big of an issue. These platies as well are about to burst with babies, I believe. Either that or I'm feeding them way too much. We'll find out together. I believe the first choice is the more likely one, because not all of them are fat. Like, this is a male, and that one's far bigger. That one's far bigger. But that'll conclude this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. It helps out. And I'll catch you next one.